So welcome, 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 our brilliant and beloved colleague, Rochelle. We so appreciate your consistent leadership and solidarity. And as always at Setsi, we begin all things by giving thanks to our creator, by giving thanks to the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We give thanks to all our ancestors, all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We give thanks to all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So Rochelle, can you please introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers and share a bit about your remarkable work?
Yeah, so my name is Rochelle Grayson, and I'm the founder of Mosaic Accelerator. We are based in Vancouver, British Columbia, and Canada. And we are a fairly new technology accelerator. We launched about a year ago, so we are celebrating our 1 year anniversary and have just launched our second cohort 2 weeks ago. Um, we are an early stage technology accelerator that supports, I like to say, intersectional women who do not have tech backgrounds but want to build tech startups. And really, when I talk about early stage, let's just clarify those concepts because I know sometimes it's fuzzy. For us, early stage is literally from idea all the way to sort of early revenue. So you're in market and you're doing some early revenues. That's how we define early stage. And then in terms of intersectional women, how we define that, because that's a fairly new term, and a lot of people have asked me, what do you mean by that? Really, what I'm looking at are women who straddle multiple worlds of identity. And what I mean by that is you could be a woman and Black or African, or you could be a woman and Latina. So there's definitely ethnicity and race, but you could also be a woman and LGBTQ plus community, or you could be a woman and you're neurodiverse, or in Canada, you are a newcomer to Canada. So you literally are straddling multiple worlds, your home country and this new country where you landed. So what I'm trying to do is create a place where women who view the world through this intersectional lens can actually find a safe space to build technology, especially since many of them do not have tech backgrounds. And the public conversation around women and technology is we need more women in tech. And I totally agree. Yes. Usually, though, the follow on sentence is, therefore, we need more women in STEM and science, technology, engineering, and math. And to that, I sort of wanted to offer a counterpoint because my background is not in STEM. I am a businesswoman. I have a German literature undergrad. And so I wanted all women to know that there's a place for them in technology and that they should be part of this emerging, very profitable, very financeable industry and that they should not be left behind. So that's really the motivation behind Mosaic, was to create a space for those whose minds may not quite function in the way that someone in STEM's mind works, and that maybe is a little more right brain and a little less left brain, and then help them understand how they can excel and be leaders in technology as well. And so that there's not just one career path or path to success in the technology world. There are lots of different ways you can get there.
What a beautiful journey. Thank you so much for all that you're doing for so many, and you're just incredible visionary leadership. I love the approach in terms of intersectionality, and it meets so many needs. So once again, congrats. That's absolutely phenomenal. So my next
Thank
question, what's inspiring you right now? What has you curious, or what's keeping you up at nights?
So what's really inspiring me is the women that are coming basically, that are showing up, raising their hands, taking on this challenge, because for many of them it is very, very daunting and very scary. And that's what inspires me, is their courage, their vision. One of the things that I'm a firm believer in is that innovation comes from intersectionality. I believe that where really interesting things happen are when you merge two different worlds and you find a solution that addresses something that isn't just one simple problem, but usually is a little messy and maybe has some complex layers to it. So anyone with an intersectional lens, I find they're the ones who actually view the world this way. So they also see solutions that people who are not intersectional often do not see, because that's just how we live our lives. So that's where innovation happens. And the innovation is amazing. Many of the women have really know a community, they know an industry, and they see the pains in those industries. And so they're also teaching me about new things that I don't know about and new areas that I'm not familiar with. But most of them are very socially oriented. They're trying to make the world a better place. They're trying to support the marginalized communities or the marginalized people within communities. And they are coming up with some really creative ideas, whether that's in health, whether that's socially, whether that's environmentally. They really are trying to leverage these new technologies to support these communities and these wonderful people of the world and make it a much more inclusive world for technologists and for the technology solutions that we see. What keeps me up at night is funding. I am solidly aware that we need to find better models of funding these ventures, and that not all ventures are meant to be ventured back ventures, companies, and that's okay. They still can be solid, sustainable businesses that have impact in their communities, that grow, that employ others, that build confidence. So one of the things that I'm really trying to understand is when I talk about building an entrepreneurial community, clearly I'm starting with entrepreneurs, but I'm also really right now, this next chapter is looking at investors and looking at funding models and how can we provide funding in ways that we can, if entrepreneurs have great ideas, that those ideas can get the funding they need to excel and to launch and to get going. And so many people from underserved communities don't have the networks to money at quite the same abundance as others. And so I want to find ways to do that. More importantly, I want to find ways for intersectional women to be funding other intersectional women, because often we don't think of ourselves as investors. We don't think that's something that we're part of. That is, finance is not my thing. I don't understand this. So I want to get more women. I want them to create wealth. I'm really puzzled by the fact that in Western culture, non-accredited investors can spend all the money they want on charities, and all they can get is maybe a tax credit, but the return is capped. And I'm really trying to understand why you can't spend thousands of dollars on something that perhaps might return a higher investment and return on investment versus doing a charity. Mosaic, we are actually a for-profit organization that you can be for profit and do good. And it's not an either or, and it doesn't have to just be not for profit or charities that do that work. If I'm telling my entrepreneurs that I want them to build sustainable businesses, I should be doing the same thing. And I shouldn't be relying on just government grants and trying to make ends meet. I should find a sustainable business model that allows me to continue to do the work that I do. And I don't think that the two are actually in competition, or that there's that it's one or the other. So if I'm doing that, if I'm telling my business people to do that, I need to do that myself, and I need to walk the walk and not just talk the talk. And I want to provide also funding mechanisms so people can get more than just a tax credit, but actually get bigger interest rates and bigger returns on their investments. And I want to do that also for the average person. If you have a little bit of extra capital, how do you get started and do all of that? So what is keeping me up is what kind of financial vehicles are available to do something like that? And how do I start bringing in everyone to be part of this ecosystem, whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you're someone who wants to support entrepreneurs and support the work that they're doing.
That's incredible. A lot of what you said reminded me of some of the work that my colleagues at Catalyst Community Finance are trying to do in terms of, the regulatory frameworks, the OSC and others, and as well just the sheer innovation of trying to figure out ways to create new vehicles to shift capital and the flows of capital to folks that's a lot of times on the margin, the periphery of the economy, that don't have access. So once again, I just think that this is brilliant, and I applaud your leadership, visionary leadership.
Yeah. I haven't figured out all the details yet, so I'm in progress, but I would say that's really that is the big nut I'm trying to crack right now. And you're right, for me, it's about capital, but it also is about basically addressing the wealth gap that I often see. And I want to make sure that, we're doing that. The wealth gap is entrepreneurs can make more money and make better businesses, and they can basically have that wealth that goes into their families, and there's a ripple effect. And I also want investors who maybe have a little bit of capital to start investing it and getting bigger returns than just savings accounts and, and sort of small bits, but actually seeing some of those big returns that people with a lot more money often see. So they're just getting wealthier and wealthier. And I want to make sure that we're creating those ripples across the board, whether you want to be an entrepreneur or whether you just want to support them, because that's ultimately how we create generational wealth. And that's the best way to do that.
Ashe, thank you so much. I appreciate your leadership. So my next question, what challenges and barriers are you facing in your work? And what are some of the approaches you and your colleagues are taking to overcome some of these challenges and barriers?
Yeah. So I think the challenge is, you mentioned sort of frameworks, financial frameworks. So I would say the first big challenge is really understanding what are the limitations of the frameworks, and then how do you get around it. But I would argue that that's where my entrepreneurial mindset comes in. I am an entrepreneur at heart, so I'm really approaching this as there's a problem here, and how do I solve that? So I'm looking at what financial vehicles, I'm looking at new vehicles, I'm looking at how do we democratize funding. So that involves, maybe I'm looking at some ideas around blockchain. I'm looking at other things just to really understand, are there models here that we can sort of empower people? And I know blockchain and crypto right now are bad, but there fundamentally are some, I think, some concepts in terms of how you can democratize, wealth and trading and a variety of other things. So that's something I'm investigating. In terms of my approach, one of the approaches I would say that's fundamentally different about Mosaic versus other perhaps tech accelerators, and I've heard this from several of the women, because many of the women in my accelerator are also in other accelerators. So most entrepreneurs I find go to 2, 3, 4 accelerators, because in many ways, sometimes they're chasing money, they're chasing funding, and so they go to apply to different ones. One of the things that I fundamentally do is it's less about teaching them business, because I actually believe we know what we need to do. We actually have the knowledge. And I recently attended, like last week, the TED conference, and there was a gentleman talked about sort of development and economic development. And he said the adage that we often quote is, teach someone, give someone a fish and they eat for a day, teach someone to fish and they know and they can provide for life. And he argued, though, that that actually is fairly, in some ways, colonization mindset, where it's like, I'm going to teach you how to do what you need to do, right? Because you don't really know how to do this. And when reality, you know better what you need to do in your circumstance, in your country, in your culture, in your community, in your domain, way better than I do. So for me to tell you how to do things is a pretty patronizing. And I think that what we need to really do is trust entrepreneurs that they know what to do, and provide them with the supports. That could be mentorship, advising, as well as funding. So I'm not just saying money, but also making sure that they're making good decisions, and then let them do what they know how to do, and get out of the way. And so a lot of what Mosaic is about is, we have modules, we have education videos like everyone else, but I only show them as needed, or when the issues come up, or if someone says, I'm struggling with this, then I provide it to them, as opposed to saying everybody has to follow a very specific educational path. Because I do find that that assumes that, one, you don't know anything, and not everybody needs the same support. So we really do try to personalize and customize. We have, in some ways, I would like to say, a library of content. And then depending on what individuals need, we will surface it and say, here's something that you should watch. And if anyone else is interested, you can watch that as well. But we also let the entrepreneurs drive it. They're supposed to drive their businesses. Why can't they drive their own learning, right? I just think that that's really, a lot of accelerators treat them like fifth graders, and they're adults. They've chosen to do this. They've chosen a path. Part of being entrepreneurial is figuring out how to drive your own ambitions and drive your own direction. And if we're not modeling that in our accelerators, we're actually handicapping them as they move forward. Um, I would say, and then the other challenge is just figuring out how to deploy capital in more innovative ways. I'm kind of a little bit, here in North America, there are a lot of pitch contests, a lot of, winner takes all, or the top three get the whole pool. And for me, I don't really quite like that model. I feel like, if you've put in time, you spent 8 weeks, you spent 3 months, 4 months in an accelerator, and only the top three get funded, well, what about the others? Like they've put in time, they've invested things, and does everyone need the top amount of money, or could that capital be spread more equitably across the cohort? So these are things that for me, I'm trying to figure out how do we more equitably even share the pools of money that we have, as opposed to, the top three or the top 5 or 10 get all the money and then everyone else kind of loses out. And maybe we're not really even, and we're not telling them that their time and their efforts are worthwhile. So those are some of the challenges that I'm trying to address. Nothing wrong with contests, but I think there's so many of them now, and everyone's going to those and hoping they make it, and then if they don't, they're incredibly disappointed because it feels like they've wasted their time. So, and possibly they have, because they haven't gotten the return on their time, on their investment. So I think it's a fair assessment. So how do we make sure that there actually is an ROI for the entrepreneurs as well as for the programs and for the funders?
Indeed. Thank you so much for your candor and your leadership. So my next question, do you have a set of key priorities right now in your work you'd like to share or amplify with our community of practice?
Yeah, so I would say sort of my first of all, my key sort of ideas, or what I'm trying to do is, first of all, just support as many intersectional women. So as a community, let's just get the word out. That's what I'm doing. I just want to support as many. I want to make it as accessible as possible, because I think the more we have, the more we can showcase that there are amazing ideas and that there really isn't a dearth of entrepreneurship and fundable entrepreneurship out there. Because right now, that's often what I hear is like, how many women are there actually who fit this, right? And I would love to say we have thousands of women that fit this model, right? Not just a couple that we've cherry picked. The other thing is, I would say, I'm looking to partner with other sort of institutions that are trying to think about this whole capital space, and how can we come up with some new models that really support both investors, sort of more equitable, democratize the investment process, as well as really support the entrepreneurs in much more meaningful ways. And so I'm looking to partner with them. One of the models that I'm exploring with some local venture capitalists is even, do they pay me? Because by paying me, I'm actually doing the hard work of building solid companies so that they have better businesses to fund. I'm doing the hard work. I'm making sure that these companies are, I'm vetting them and making sure they have all the pieces in place so that when they get to further on funding, whatever that looks like, could be crowdfunding, crowd lending, but that they actually are solid businesses. I'm doing their due diligence, right? What is that worth to them for me to basically do due diligence where I'm meeting with entrepreneurs day in and day out? I'm also an investor. I'm also an angel investor. I've seen lots of data rooms. I've seen lots of pitches. There's nothing like working side by side with an entrepreneur week after week to really understand how their mind works, how they execute, how they plan, how they build partnerships, how they talk to their customers. Um, no data room and no pitch will ever replace that. So in many ways, the due diligence I have is much more hands-on, really front lines, and I can talk to people and say, here's what I think needs to happen. Here's where I think their strengths are. Here's where I think they need some support, and really be very, very tactical in terms of my recommendations as these companies move forward. I'm trying to build the pipeline, the beginning of the pipeline, so that we have more companies that can then continue on and grow and be things we point to later on. So anyone who's willing to partner with me in those spaces and explore those ideas, I would be quite open to that. Corporations, banks, there are lots of things, because also loans and like I said, I'm not looking for one size fits all. I think that there are multiple models, crowdfunding platforms, crowd equity platforms. I really want to, just find ways, grants, obviously, but even beyond that, I think it's important for me to provide a spectrum of options. And then anyone who's interested in investing and becoming an investor, let's talk and let's see how we can make that happen.
That's beautiful. So my second last question, what is your ultimate goal and what success look like and feel like to you and your colleagues?
So success for me feels like we figured out a model that we think works really well for intersectional women, and really to replicate that across the globe. So I am not looking to keep this in Canada. I've started it here. I feel like this is the pilot. This is where I'm learning and trying to figure things out. But I've had interest from people in Rwanda, in Kenya, around all over, sort of the African diaspora, in the US. And what I want to do is partner with local organizations, communities, people there to help them bring something like this to their community. So this is not about the Mosaic, me doing everything, but really about creating a network of organizations who are doing similar work for their communities that are culturally relevant, that make sense for the people there, but maybe incorporate some of the philosophies that I have in terms of how I've built these programs and how I've built some of the funding models.
Incredible. So my last question, do you have any closing thoughts or calls to action for our listeners and our viewers?
For listeners, I would say, first of all, if you are non-technical, you can start a tech startup. So please don't have the technology be a problem. The basic reason I've seen this also happen in the last 5 years is due to things like no code, low code tools, as well as artificial intelligence. They're really like, we actually use a lot of that in the Mosaic sort of curriculum. So I am leveraging AI, I'm leveraging no code, low code tools to get prototypes and MVPs done in less than 4 weeks. So if you think, oh my goodness, I have to build a mobile app, you don't necessarily have to have like super design things. If you can drag and drop, you can build a tech prototype. It won't be perfect. It won't be necessarily your ultimate, goal or where you end up, but it will be some way you can start getting into market and seeing how people respond to your ideas. The other thing I would say is, just I know imposter syndrome is real across the board. Your lived experience is an asset, not a liability. And that lived experience can really help you see the world and solve a problem in a way no one else can. So I just want people to know that and to see that. And if you have some really cool ideas around how we can build a global ecosystem, entrepreneurial ecosystem that supports, entrepreneurs as well as investors, please reach out to me because I want to have those conversations and I want to hear how others are doing it. And I want to share ideas with you as well.
Absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for your leadership, tenacity, and all the actionable insights you provide our community of practice. Your work is inspiring, and yeah, I'm just grateful to see the flourishing of this remarkable work right in front of me. So once again, I just applaud all that you do for so many. And as always, it's Setsi. We close the way we began this conversation, this interview, by giving thanks to the original stewards, the various lands we're on. We give thanks to all our ancestors, all those who toiled, without compassion or compensation. We give thanks to all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. Thank you so much, Rochelle. I appreciate you, fam.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that.